Hey makers, it's Laura from OpenWorks. For today's Making in Place segment, we're actually going to be making some beer at home, which is so exciting because we've gone through the ingredients, the equipment, and the important stage of cleaning and sanitizing. And so now we're going to get in the kitchen and get brewing. And what we're going to be doing today is bringing the pot of water up to 155 degrees and letting it kind of steep or stay at that for about 30 minutes with the milled grain in the water just kind of flowing around to get the sugars off of the grain into the water. And then we're going to be bringing it up, the temperature up that is, and adding the dried and liquid malt extracts, because again we're doing extract brewing versus all grain brewing, so it's just going to take a little bit of less time and a little less equipment. And then we're going to be doing the hop additions, or adding hops, which is a beautiful flower from a vine plant, which acts as a preservative and adds flavor and bittering and aroma agents to it. And then we're going to be bringing it all down temperature to about 70-80 degrees, which we'll add or pitch our yeast. I hope you enjoy the segment today of making in place and brewing at home, and have a great brew day. We'll see you on the other side. All right, now we're going to brew some beer. So we have our 5-gallon brew pot that's been cleaned, and we have about 2 gallons of tap water in there, and it's getting up to 155 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's the temperature that we're going to steep the grain at. And so we put our roasted, malted, milled grain into a grain sock. Looks kind of funny. And so we put it in here, and then we tied a knot at the top so that water, once we put it in there, can kind of flow and get all the sugars off and all that good stuff. And so now we put the flame on a little bit ago. Let's check the temp. I can hear it getting warmer. Once you start doing this a lot, you get familiar with the sounds and the smells and the sights and how they look. And so just by looking at the water and watching it move, I can tell it's getting there. And I know the sound of my brew pot. We're at about 130, and so we have a little ways to go. But once we get there, we'll put the grain in, put it on, and let it steep for 30 minutes. And now we're going to take the grain sock out because it's been soaking for 30 minutes or steeping, so now we have a wort. So we're going to grab the spoon because it's hot and lift it up and not squeeze it. Just kind of let it drift. Woo! And if you can see it, there's a dark liquid coming from it. What do you think, Leo? It's pouring, that's right. And then we're going to take a look at this beautiful, beautiful wort. So, are we gonna make beer?
Yes.
Yes.
Sure.
All right, so we're gonna remove the top. I'm going to be careful to keep my toddler away from the flame,
No.
which she's not happy about. And you can see, just visually, it's getting closer to a boil because the bubbles are changing and it's getting steamier. And so the bubbles are getting smaller.
No.
Yeah, they are getting smaller. Leo really loves bubbles. So as far as temperature, we want to get close to a boil. So boil is 212. So we're at we're at 200. So I actually might terminate boil, so shut off the boil and add the extracts. But turning off the boil is essential at this point, because if you keep the flame on or the heat on, if you have an electric stove, move it off the stove. But if you keep the flame on, it's going to burn your extracts, which is going to make your homebrew have a, quote, homebrew taste. So it's going to make it taste like burnt sugar. So I'm going to terminate boil, and then I'm going to add my LME, which is liquid malt extract, which is really going to make it a dark beer. And then I'm going to add my dry malt extract too. What do you think? Sweet.
Oh, sweet.
And pour. What am I doing, Leo?
I poured.
I'm pouring. So we're going to put the flame back on and bring it back up to a boil, and then we're going to start our hop hour. Are you excited?
Yes.
Yes. All right, let's do it. Yeah. And I'm going to leave the top off, or I can put this on a little bit, but not all the way. So you always want an area for your steam to rise, because if you do this, something called a boil over can happen where all the stuff in your kettle comes out. Whoop, shouldn't have left it on. All right, once we get to a boil, we're gonna start adding the hops. Right, Leo?
Yeah.
All right. And you see the surface of the beer is changing. Right now, it's a little frothy, and you see some big bubbles and little bubbles. But as it gets closer to a boil, you'll see the bubbles change, and that's because the proteins in the beer are changing with the heat. So we reached 212. I checked on my brewing thermometer, and so that means that it's time to start our hop hour. So I'm gonna add the 1 ounce of Centennial hops. It's really pretty. Hey Ryan, you wanna smell it?
Ooh.
And so this is gonna give our beer its bite and some initial flavor. And so here we go. Ooh. And so that's it. And so we're gonna set the timer for 55 minutes. Let me use my funny little wall timer. All right. And then I'm going to kind of stir it a little bit just to mix it in there. And I'm gonna keep the boil on, and I'm gonna put the lid on, but not all the way. So you don't wanna do this. You wanna leave it ajar like that. So I'm gonna leave it ajar, and we're gonna wait 55 minutes and check on it, make sure it doesn't boil over so we don't lose all the goodness that we want in our beer. But then we'll move on to the next part. But we're almost done. You guys are making it. All right. We're at 15 minutes before the end of the boil, so we are going to add Irish moss, which is a coagulant, which is going to grab some of the proteins and bring them to the bottom. Makes for such a little bit of a clearer beer. So grab about a teaspoon, pop it in. Oopsies. There we go. So now we add the last hops. And these are going to be our aroma hops. So really, when you drink that beer, you smell comes from this a lot. And the malts and the yeast, but this will come out. Ready, set, 4. So we have 5 minutes, and then we're going to terminate boil and cool it down, add some water, add the yeast, and we're done brewing. So we only have about a minute, a little less now, of brew time left. So we are going to get our sink ready for cooling. So at this point, time is important. So we want to cool the beer or the wort as quickly as possible. So we're gonna do it by making an ice bath in my sink. And so I'm gonna plug up my sink, and I just cleaned it with our cleaner. So now it's all shiny and clean. And I'm gonna fill it up with the coldest water that my tap can give and put ice in there. But right now, when we terminate boil, it's gonna be at 212 or so, and we wanna get it down to between 70 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And so that's gonna be a lot of heat that's leaving our brew pot. And so it's gonna be quick, quick, quick. And so I'm going to terminate boil right now, start to make my bath, and here we go. So plugging up the sink. Cold water on. I'm gonna put my ice directly into the sink. Now everything that touches the beer from now on needs to be completely clean. And so before I was clean, but now I'm super careful. It's kind of like how right now you want to make sure you wash your hands a lot. It's an extra level of care. All right, transfer. Here we go. Just right into the kitchen sink. I've just finished filling the first ice bath, and let's check the temperature. I'm gonna stick my clean, sanitized thermometer in here. So we're about actually at 170, so cooler than I thought, which is good. Right. So the water's still feeling pretty cool. This is our second ice bath. No more ice though, and less steam. So let's give it a go. So our brewing thermometer, which tells us that it is a little more than 100 degrees Fahrenheit. What I'm going to do is call it at about 100 degrees, maybe a little less, and then add 2.5 gallons of cold water to it. Now, I took the temperature of my tap water and it's 60 degrees. And so if you're adding 60 degrees, combining it with 100 degrees, you're gonna get down probably close to 80, maybe a little less. I'm hoping for 75 is my sort of golden ticket number. So, so I have my cleaned, rinsed, and sanitized fermentation bucket right here, ready to go. And we're gonna take our condensed beer extract that has cooled in the sink and add it to this. And then we're gonna add equal parts cold water, so it goes up to 5 gallons. Now, you can see on the side of this that it has a measuring, which is really, really helpful sort of to give you an actual visual for how much is in here. And so here we go. So I'm going to take the beer, come on over. So here's gonna pour into the bucket. Ooh, it's that beautiful black brown color. So, and as I pour, try to prevent some of the end sediment from going in there because we don't need it anymore. So I'm going to dump that down the drain, which is fine, and then I'm going to add cold water just to the brew pot because it fits into the sink rather than using the pitcher, and fill that up to 5 gallons. Dump it in. So now I'm going to put our brew kettle aside. We're going to grab our cleaned and sanitized spoon and give it a good mix. But as I stir, I'm not touching the sides because I'm using a metal spoon with a plastic container. And I want to make sure to keep the sides free of scratches to prevent little spaces for bacteria and other things to make a comfy home. And again, anything that touches the beer at this point needs to be super clean. All right, so my guess was pretty correct. We are at 73. Perfect. Okay, so now we want to add our yeast. And so this is dry yeast, but there's also liquid yeast varieties. It's specific for brewing. So I've sanitized the outside of this because I don't know where it's been, but I'm going to cut it with sanitized scissors and sprinkle it in, and then I'm going to use my field hockey muscles to mix it up but not touch the sides. Here we go. Sprinkle, sprinkle, sprinkle. So when I feel like it's mixed sufficiently, I'm gonna take a hydrometer reading so I can get an idea of the gravity that it starts at to give me an idea of how it changes after the yeast does its thing and it turns into alcohol. So, but for me, I just really want to know that it starts and finishes where I want it. So I'm gonna give it a spin and a drop to get a good reading, and my hope is to have it between 1 and 2. So beer start, which is up here in the green. So ready, spin, drop. You hear it pop in the bottom. Let's take a look. Yep, it's within the 1 to 2 range. So beer start. So I'm gonna place it on the top of the fermenter and seal it shut all the way. I don't want any space going in. So now that we have our beer made and our yeast pitched and ready to go, we have to put our airlock in to measure its progress. So the airlock we're using today is a 3-part system. And so it has the initial container and then a little hat, and then you put a cap on. And you put water in here so it creates a water seal between your beer and the rest of the environment. And I usually give it a little spray on the outside, kind of wedge it into the grommeted hole, and that's it. You have your beer. So we have to wait 7 to 10 days for fermentation to be complete. And so you want to store it somewhere in your house that stays pretty consistent with temperature. So between like 65 and 72 Fahrenheit. So I like to keep my beer in my dining room. So I'm gonna move it around the corner and onto a towel that I put down. So now I just have to clean up. So from start to finish, I would say you need about 3 to 4 hours to do this. Half an hour to an hour, getting ready, prepping, cleaning, sanitizing, that kind of thing. You're gonna need about an hour and a half to brew-ish. And then you'll need probably half an hour to an hour to clean up and to cool your beer and get it ready. And then it's just kind of waiting patiently. And so we have about 2 weeks before the next stage in our process. We're going to bottle and then share it.